Shut up and sit down.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You still have distrust there.
We all come from very different places.
Man, we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
We deserve better.
People have to have the information in front of them.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
There you go. Just promote people who are doing something. Volunteer to work with people who you like. And
take an issue that's important to you and do something.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only.
Fight for liberty.
This is the cherry on top.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fight for Liberty show. Today we have an awesome show for you guys. Today we actually have two guests. Don't get to do that one very often. And we are going to be talking about elections and running as a libertarian. And what I'm hoping is that you either get excited about the candidates that we are running here in the Libertarian Party, so you get fired up and join a campaign next cycle, or you hear how awesome of an experience it is to run for office and start planning your upcoming campaign. I hope one of those two things happens because of this conversation, and I'm really excited to get into it. But first, we're going to hear just a quick word from one of our sponsors. This and all shows of the Fight for Liberty is brought to you by Blood of Tyrants Wine. If you want to enjoy a nice night in while also taking down the tyrannical state and sipping on the blood of your enemies, go on over to bloodoftyrants.wine and get yourself a couple of bottles tonight. Because let's be real, you're not just going to drink one. So you need to buy 4 or 5, right? Use promo code F4L. You'll get $5 off of your first purchase, and you'll help the show and the network. So we would really appreciate that. Go on over and get your stuff today. But without further ado, we have two awesome guests for you tonight. United States Senate candidate from Indiana, James Sceniak, and US Congressional Candidate from Alabama, Mr. Jonathan Realz. Welcome to the show, guys.
Very nice. Appreciate being here and appreciate being with your audience. Always good to be back.
I'm happy to be here, but I'm also happy to hear that this is sponsored by Blood of Tyrants, because that is 100% the best wine I've ever had in my entire life. Period. Hands down.
Hell yeah.
Try some.
I actually haven't gotten my hands on a bottle yet. I have some on the way, so I'm quite excited for that.
I think I've consumed about 4 bottles myself, total. 4 entire bottles. That was what got me through National Convention. That and the Hennessy.
Nice. I don't blame you on that one. All right, so first question for you guys. We can take it at whichever order, whoever wants to just answer first. It's going to be a little bit easier with just the two of you than 3. That's always hectic. But first question, who was the first person to come up with the idea of your guys' race? Was it you, or did somebody suggest it? How did that all happen?
I don't know who's going to go first, but so I did not I had run for office once before. I ran for a state house race about 10 years ago as a libertarian, and I wasn't really planning on running for office, but it was kind of one of those things where I was mulling it over, being like, I really want to get back more involved politically, and I got asked to speak. Not as a candidate, but I got asked to speak before Spike whenever he was on the bus tour. And so I go do that and walk off stage, and I got cornered by 5 executive committee members from the Libertarian Party, and they said, "So you're running for office?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." And they're like, "Yes, you are. We just watched you. You're running for office."
Nice.
So what do you want to run for? And I was like, well, and I once again, I wasn't planning on running for office, but I had looked at all of the, the rules when it came to like certain candidates and things like that. And in Alabama, you cannot announce that you're running for any office except federal until about, I think it's 6 months before the election. And no, it's 1 year before the election, but you have to suspend your campaign if the House or Senate has a session, and that includes an emergency session, anything like that. If they are in session, you have to suspend your campaign. No donations can come in. You can't do anything. You can't spend money. It's very weird. So I was like, well, you know what? I don't really want to deal with that, so I guess we'll go federal. So here we are.
For me, it was coming off of a very successful Libertarian run in 2020, and I realized that I needed to get really involved in the party. But what I saw is people wanting to use our ballot access for negative reasons that would ultimately have a negative impact on the Libertarian Party here in Indiana. So I wanted a strong voice at the top of the ticket. At the time, no strong voice was announced. So I was the first one to put my name in for the Senate that really contrasted the other one who wanted it. And he ended up dropping out soon after I announced. But I wanted to make sure we had a strong Libertarian voice at that top of the ticket.
So this was you got yourself into this mess. You have no one to blame but yourself.
I did, and I did not want to run for federal office for the first time because I was definitely, this was my first run. I was looking more for something local, Greenwood, my hometown. And I believe that's where we can actually make the most impact. So that's what my original vision was. But when I saw that this other individual wanted the nomination, and it wasn't even the one who I went into the convention against, it was someone previous before that. And he just had a terrible message. So I knew that we needed something better than that.
Oh man, I can totally sympathize. That would be a driving factor for me. If I felt like somebody was going to put out a bad libertarian message, I would immediately put my name into the hat to run against them. We fight tooth and nail constantly against bad libertarian messaging, and then whatever the duopoly is, that libertarians believe and they never get it right. And we're constantly fighting that battle. We don't need libertarians fighting against us either.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And for me, it was amazing because that individual dropped out, but I ended up running against another really good libertarian. And it was fun to have a contested convention going in, and it got our base excited. I think the pre-debate was one of the most attended debates that we had for our nomination. So that was a fun part of it too. But yeah, I was definitely glad that third voice, he ended up dropping out.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that clarification because I'm pretty sure your actual convention opponent and most of his campaign watches the show. So
yeah, no, he's a great libertarian, has a great libertarian message. Nothing wrong with his ideals, but there was a third individual in that race.
I cannot wait until every state has contested nomination processes for every race. That's what we should be striving for, because I think it's steel sharpens steel kind of situation where you are honing your message, and trying to out libertarian another libertarian, and it gets really interesting.
And to me, that's what will make us a strong party, right? Competition always breeds a stronger, healthy debate, and I believe that we do need more contested races. I'd love to see, like you said, every race be contested at convention and the best candidate go forward.
If I decide to run again, and a lot of people are asking me if I'll run for this position again, if I decide to run again, that is one of the things that I'm striving for. Is I want two people running against me. I want to have a three-way contested nomination process, and I want to have a bunch of forums and debates that are for outward facing, not just for the party. And that's how we get the message out there. And somebody might be better at explaining a certain topic than somebody else, and they may not get the nomination, but hopefully the person who does would be smart about it and say, you know what, this person's better at explaining this than I am, so I'm going to lean into what they're doing.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
Sorry. That's what the two major parties do. You know, their primaries, each candidate kind of feeds to a different base within the party, and at the end, they all come together. But in the primary process, they fired up hundreds of thousands of individuals to vote in the general election who might not have been a part of that party at the beginning of the election cycle. So every time, you know, we can have a libertarian, you know, leaning into like the kind of left libertarian, kind of classical liberal-esque thing. You know, we can have some like honestly Republican light, like we get called, candidate, and they're like leaning into that base. But if they all endorse each other at the end, we get all of it supporting whoever comes out in the end as the best libertarian.
That's it. We should mirror what the other two parties are doing, and when we get to that point, it'll be great for the Libertarian Party.
You know, I really don't feel like there's a such thing as I use the term left libertarian when I'm talking to somebody who's not a libertarian, but at the end of the day, libertarians are libertarians. There's not a such thing as a left libertarian. People call me a left libertarian all the time because I've got long hair and seem like a hippie person, but I'm a center libertarian. I'm just a libertarian.
Right. It's funny, during my race, I got called everything from extreme left to extreme right to very moderate. So I don't think people knew what to call me.
Somebody called me a right-wing extremist, and while I was responding to that, I got a phone call from a newspaper, and the first question they asked me was, "Do you think it would be fair to describe your platform as extreme left?" And I was like, this is the trouble of the libertarian candidate right here. This is our struggle.
Yeah.
So I got some of that same.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, you already kind of brought this up, but libertarians already have a pretty strong reputation amongst at least a sizable selection of the population. What did you guys do to kind of curb that negative stereotype that was already in people's minds before you got to talk to them?
Well, a great tip that I got from John Mons about 10 years ago whenever I was running for office in Georgia. Before I moved to Alabama, he was one of my campaign advisors, and I don't know if everybody in the audience is familiar with John Mons, but he is a total badass. John Mons is awesome.
Hell yeah.
And he gave me some advice, and it's just like, well, figure out the issues that don't seem like they're a libertarian issue, and they seem like, you know, people perceive a libertarian, if somebody's perceiving a libertarian as like a far-right extremist, hit them with something that seems like a left issue, but use the libertarian spin on it. Mm-hmm. And that really changes perception, and you can kind of see the wheels turning in their head like, wait a minute, I feel like I've been deceived by like what I've been told a libertarian is. Now, you might get some of those people going like, oh, okay, well, I don't like other libertarians, but I like you. You're one of the good ones. I've heard that at least 20 times from people. Well, you're one of the good ones. But then I'm like, well, listen, these are actually standard platform positions. You're dealing with people who call themselves libertarians that are not. That happens all the time. I mean, Donald Trump called himself a libertarian. He's not.
Right.
There's definitely a lot that uphill battle of branding what libertarianism is, but for me, it was just taking the policies that were relevant to my constituents, and a lot of that was inflation. Inflation was top of the ticket, abortion, and then civil rights issues, and taking those and bringing them down to a libertarian perspective, making them very clear, presenting it on my website. And then the media was actually really good to me in Indiana. We got some really good coverage here. So overall, I think the message went out well, but it was, for a lot of people, was realizing what a libertarian is for the first time. And even though they saw other libertarian candidates run in the past, sometimes the spin is a little bit different. And with me, I believe that because I had a solid platform and people understood what I was running on, they really addressed those questions.
One of the things that I liked to do is I had different goals. First, like if I'm going to reach out to the left, what do I want to reach out to the left on? Well, I don't want to give them their issue to reach out to them on. I need to pull them closer to liberty. So one of the things that was like a key focus of the campaign was making people on the left care about the Federal Reserve. and it's about the pitch. And so I never used the term Federal Reserve in the campaign. I used predatory, nationalized banking monopoly. The left hates monopolies. They hate nationalism. They hate predatory banking. You've got them. That's the Federal Reserve. You can talk about the Fed all day long, but as soon as you say the Fed, you sound like they're like, oh, that's what Rand Paul talks about, and then now they want to shut it down. But predatory nationalized banking monopoly allowed me to talk about, you know, the inflation, but it also allowed me to talk about the fact that, you know, these federally backed student loans, you know, that's an issue that people on the left talk about all the time, but those loans it's inflated money. Like it's still the Fed that's driving that entire process. And, you know, they don't like the student loans because they look at them as predatory, which they absolutely is a predatory program that the federal government should have never started that. But it's a big talking point for the left. But it allowed me to spin one of their talking points and make it about the Fed and inflation. And doing those types of little switcheroos are a good way to pull people into the libertarian mindset.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point there when you said that I don't want to give them one of their issues. Because I think libertarians make a mistake a lot of talking to a Democratic voter and saying, you know, well, we were pro-LGBT before it was cool. Or, you know, we've been pro-marijuana legalization before it was cool. Well, I mean, I know not in either of your states, but here in New York, we have both of those things passed through our state legislature. It's not really a selling point. Even being pro-drugs in a state that still has it criminalized, like you guys are in, isn't a major selling point. They get that out of their guy. The Democrat is going to stand for that. They get that policy plank out of their candidate. I like what you're talking about actually, you know, teaching them something new, bringing them closer to liberty, not just being like, hey, we're everything you like plus a bunch of weird shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I typically, if I was talking to anybody on the left, if I didn't talk about the predatory nationalized banking monopoly, I was going to talk to them about how gun control laws are used in a way to increase mass incarceration and remove rights from minority communities. And, you know, one of the things that I told a Democratic candidate who is honestly, Alabama's weird. We have a lot of Democrats who are way closer to libertarian than the Republicans here. And I was telling another Democrat candidate, because she was kind of like, she brought up red flag laws, and she felt like, oh, well, the mentally unstable shouldn't have access to weapons. And I said, okay, well, how long until you have some sort of, you know, far right state say that being gay is a mental disorder? Are you gonna take the guns away from them? And she's like, oh, well, I hadn't thought about that. I'm like, yeah, well, what about the bills that, you know, they've introduced to try and say that being trans is a mental disorder? Do you want to disarm those people? Well, no. Okay, well, then I don't think you support red flag laws. And she's like, you know what? Now that you bring that up, I don't know if I do. And I'm like, okay. So those are the types of messages that I think need to be out there.
Absolutely. You said that really well.
Mm-hmm. I like doing the same thing to the right about the drug war.
Oh yeah.
You know, even because they're pro drug war, they're pro police most of the time. But just explaining to them just the massive amount of waste and ridiculousness that is the war on drugs, and how much it's just raised the size and scope of government and just been a net negative. It's a lot of fun to get people like really annoyed about the war on drugs before you tell them that, oh yeah, I'm talking about the criminalization of marijuana.
See, I went to the right. I went qualified immunity, which seems like that would be where I would go on the left. But no, the people on the right, they want government accountability as well. But one of the things that I feel like a lot of people do not talk about with qualified immunity is that it doesn't just, it's not just applicable to law enforcement. It's applicable to anyone in government. Mm-hmm. And when you are talking to somebody on the right, they get very fired up about that because they feel like pretty much everybody who's in government is corrupt and a slime ball, except the police.
Right.
You know, right.
And Donald Trump.
And Donald Trump, right.
Although I did hear defund the FBI from the right this year.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh,
Me.
yeah.
It did surprise me.
I loved that one. It's been fun, but annoyingly short-lived. Every time something like that happens, where we're like, "Oh yeah, the right's getting it," or like, "Oh yeah, the left is getting it," it's like, nope. It always gets co-opted or snuffed or something.
Now, defund the FBI is actually that's a pretty far left talking point that's growing as well. Because I've heard it a lot with. I don't know, in the past 2 years, I hear a lot more people on the left talking about the FBI killed Martin Luther King. And they're like, the FBI needs to go. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, keep going, guys. We'll start there. Okay. And yeah, if we can just get the left on board with getting rid of the DEA and the FBI, and then we can convince them that the Fed needs to go as like a third step, I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, there are a lot of people out there that like care and are, like, I don't remember which side it is, but like left-brained, empathetic people that just feel like their only option right now is this quasi-communist bullshit that is the Democratic Party, mixed in with a bunch of neocon right-wing super crony capitalist bullshit, and like that's really their only option, because like otherwise you're voting away like basic human rights for like women's reproductive rights or like whatever it is that the right is championing against. They basically just feel stuck in the Democratic Party, and I'm really excited about the multiple candidates we had this year. Yourself especially, Jonathan, and or like Chase Oliver in Georgia. We had a lot of candidates that got to give people, you don't have to be a racist piece of shit or a communist. There's a third option here.
Yeah, I mean, in Alabama, the Democratic Party has basically imploded. Their state convention, a lot of libertarians, we actually showed up to it, and we bought a table in the back and just sat and waited for everything to go down, and then would talk to people being like, listen, we see your party's a mess, you can come with us. And which a lot of people kind of got mad about that, but there were a lot of Democrats who were happy to see us and then reached out afterwards being like, I think I might be a libertarian. I think I want out. In fact, in my congressional district, the entirety of the Democratic Party get out the vote mechanism decided they were not going to get out the vote for the Democrat and were telling people to vote for me. And that's just because they have seen how much of a mess the Democratic Party is at a national level. They do not feel like it represents them, and they feel like the national agenda is being pushed on them at the state level, and they're like, this is not even what our state cares about. And they just, I think it's done. I've had some people that are pretty high level in the Democratic Party kind of tell me that like they think they've got just a few more years and it's probably just going to completely collapse. And I would love to see that.
Hell yeah. So who was the first person you guys brought onto your campaign, and why?
So I knew it was important to get volunteers right away, and part of the reason I ran was so that we could build up, and one of my goals was to build up teams so that we can have future teams and expand them there. So the first person I brought, I believe, was from the neighboring county, and I brought him on as a campaign manager, but I saw a lot of potential with him. We had done a lot of outreach events, and he really had that passion. It turned out he was a better field manager, so we ended up moving him. I got a different campaign manager, but just his passion at those events, I knew I had to bring him on my team. It was exciting to see, and even throughout the election, he was great. It was amazing to see.
Nice.
Mine was my treasurer. Because I wanted to be able to take in money and get as much money in as fast as possible.
Which is
smart. Yeah, so we went with immediately, I want to say, before I was even announced, there was a treasurer, and we had some of the campaign team brought in. My goal with the campaign was sorry, excuse my dog barking. My goal with the campaign was because as I mentioned earlier, the state candidates could not announce yet. So my goal was to get as many people who would be interested in running for office, working on the campaign, and being out at events, so that way their face could be in front of people. We were still collecting ballot access signatures as well. So they were doing that, being like, I'm thinking about running for office. They couldn't announce, but they could be, out in public, and it gave them some experience. So by the time that convention came around, they could announce the next year. They've already been out in the field, and they've already seen how certain things work. They backed out of my campaign and started their own splinter campaigns. And so that was basically the way that we structured that. And that was by design. We had that figured out before I even announced.
Nice.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Anytime I have a candidate conversation like this and the word treasure comes up, I have to say to anyone watching, you are not going to treasure your own campaign. Don't try, don't do it, find somebody else. It's just don't.
Oh yeah, I do not want to ever be a treasurer. And the people that volunteer to do it and do a great job, they're saints. They're the real heroes of this party. It's not us candidates. It's not us. We go around and talk to people, and then they have to sit there, especially at the federal level, and use that really crappy FEC software that you have to use on a Windows computer. You can't even use a Mac to open it. It's like made in 1992. The icon's all crappy. It's very horrible. They've got to learn that entire software just to file this stupid paperwork. So yeah, they're the real heroes.
Yeah, I got lucky because this is like hypocritical learn from my mistakes advice, and I actually did treasure my own campaign when I ran for New York City Council. And luckily, the New York City Campaign Finance Board is fairly modern-ish, and they at least have a system that looks like it was built in the early 2000s and is somewhat intuitive and kind of works, and it connects to your Stripe account, so it actually like automatically logs donations for you.
Oh, wow.
That's the part that was just kind of mind-boggling. You just had to go in and like okay that all of them, and it would just file it for you. That part was dope. So I got a little bit lucky, but no, don't ever try it. I don't care how good at math you are. If you're really that good, just be a treasurer for a bunch of campaigns, because we need it.
I suggest using Nation Builder. I tried to avoid it for the longest time, but they really do a really good job of collecting all of the information and getting it exactly ready to import into the FEC stuff. So from a federal level, I definitely suggest that. It's very expensive though, so unless you're really good at fundraising, then you might not need it. If you're not good at fundraising, you might not have the money to really worry about it.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that question later on, but I'll do it now. James, what kind of CRM did you use?
So I had a great treasurer who did it all behind the scenes, and I really didn't have to worry about it, which was super nice. But we as a state have a CRM, and we did a lot of door knocking and used a lot of information from the CRM. We actually had a couple of different databases. So the CRM does mostly work within our own party. But yeah, it was good to have all that working behind the scenes, so I didn't even have to worry about it.
Yeah, momentarily forgot which state you were from and who your state chair is, and how good of a state CRM you guys have.
I mean, it's amazing. Indiana's really lucky to have our state chair, Evan McMahon, and then also just the organization. So it was really good as a candidate not to have to worry about those things functioning and working, and I could just work on my message and present it to the media. So in that way, I was super lucky.
That's awesome. Yeah, the candidate should be able to campaign full time. If you have even your borderline fully staffed campaign, you shouldn't be doing any of like the treasurer, campaign manager, field director. That work is for other people. And you should definitely, because you can't be a good candidate if you're doing all those other things. You can't hone your scripts and, like really practice your lines and get that great candidate atmosphere around you if you're constantly dealing with technological bullshit.
Now, I definitely agree with you, but I don't 100% agree with you, because I was helping out on a lot of different campaigns just because they were understaffed. They were on a skeleton crew and they were right around in my area. So I definitely helped out any way that I could with those other campaigns. And I felt like I had to, because they worked on my campaign. And that was the whole purpose of me running at the beginning, was to help these candidates get themselves, rolling. So once they were rolling and they needed help from me, I was definitely going to be doing that. So it wasn't really my job, but I felt like I needed to.
Yeah. No harm in that. So what made you think that you would be a good candidate?
I like talking.
That's helpful for sure.
Yeah.
For me, I knew what message I wanted to run. I wanted to make sure that I had the organization, and I believe that with my passion and love for politics, that's really where I wanted to go. And I knew that basically the passion inside of me had to have some sort of focus and energy, and I knew that being a candidate, I could utilize a lot of my skills. So that's the direction I headed.
Fuck yeah. And then I've got kind of the opposite question for you. What is a personality trait that you identified that would be a negative or an issue that you had to kind of work on throughout the campaign?
Are you asking the question from a libertarian perspective, or just a open-ended as a candidate in any party? Because if it's about being a libertarian and running for office, I don't like losing. So the negative character trait about myself is that I cannot take a loss. And going into it that like the chances of a libertarian winning right now, especially at a federal level, are, I wouldn't even say slim to none. They're basically non-existent. And you would have to have such a crazy series of events that would lead up to a federal candidate winning right now. But
like a concert with Afro Man?
That, or making, campaign videos with, Grammy Award winning young jock, or things like that. Those were fun things that I got to do.
Yeah.
But that's one of the benefits of running for office. For anybody who's thinking about it, you get to reach out to those people and say, hey, I'm running for Congress. And they're like, oh, somebody running for Congress is talking to me. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a celebrity or not. Like, they don't get a lot of calls from people running for Congress. And so you immediately have their attention, and you can be like, with Afro Man, it's like, hey, we're throwing this event and we are pushing for cannabis legalization here in the state of Alabama. And we were wondering if you had any dates in this time period that you could do. And he did. So we got to do it. And he was excited to be there, and we had a great time. He had a good time. Dave Jones showed up with, I shouldn't say this, but Dave Jones showed up with a giant mountain of weed and got Afro Man very high.
Nice.
And yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you can do when you're running for office.
Hell yeah.
Negative traits, there's always things that are concerning, and you have to evaluate going into any campaign. And for me, ADD focus, I either go one of two directions. I go hyper focused, or I have a million things and I can't do any of them. So making sure I had that focus. And then how I wanted to present myself in the campaign. And early on, a lot of the criticism I got was my long hair, because I had extremely long hair, it went past my shoulders, and my presentation. So I had to make some decisions with my presentation, and some of those sacrifices I didn't want to make, but as a candidate, I realized it was for the better to present a message that would reach more ears in Indiana, because you're always looking at your specific constituents and area. And so making some of those sacrifices I didn't want to do. I was too stubborn for the longest time. But eventually I realized, for the greater good of Indiana and liberty, we could make some of those sacrifices.
I'm sorry that you cut your hair.
It was
I refused.
It was a struggle. But I actually had probably a half hour to hour conversation about my hair with my campaign manager at the time. And I go, I don't care what people are saying. I'm not going to cut it. And he goes, okay, well, if that's your decision. And so it was a long discussion, a long process to even think about.
See, I felt like I only got pushback from libertarians about my hair. And everybody else seemed to not have a problem with it at all. I never ran into, even the most conservative voter never had a problem with my hair. Well, but it's state by state, like you mentioned before. But down here, I mean, you've got a lot of people that are, they've had long hair since the 70s, but they're still, as Southern conservatives, as they come, but they just have long hair. It wasn't a negative thing in most situations. Every now and then you'd have somebody who's just like, oh, just a goody, but you were never going to get them anyway, because they're super social conservative. They don't care about the size of government. They believe in legislating morality, and that the government does have a role in all this, no matter the cost. They're not a libertarian. I'm not getting their vote, so what am I worried about?
That's one thing I found is people pick the minute thing to say, well, I'm not going to vote for you because of hair or whatever. But really, the reality is, I would never ever win their vote. Period. It didn't matter whether it was the hair or whether it was a minor issue. They just wanted to use that as their excuse to not vote for me. I just would never win their vote.
I had this mustache in my first campaign picture right after I announced, and people complained about it. So I have kept it for 2 years on principle. And because it was libertarians, it never was somebody who actually could vote for me. It was somebody from, Wisconsin complaining on the internet about my mustache. And I'm like, well, you don't get to vote for me anyway, so your opinion doesn't matter. Sorry, guys.
I like it.
I like the kind of, part of the conversation. I think it gets misconstrued, because we can get votes out of every single voting demographic across the board, but we can't get everyone's vote. Like, those are two very different concepts. Like, you can target anyone that you want and talk to any person under the sun about libertarianism, and you've got a decent shot of them responding well. But there are people that just do not care about what we care about, and that are never going to care about what we care about, and are never going to vote for us. And trying to appease those people makes absolutely no sense to me.
Oh yeah, for sure. But then, like, let's say you're out canvassing and door knocking, and you run into one person that you're getting a whole lot of pushback from. Why would you spend an hour trying to convince them whenever you could easily knock on one door down and spend 15 minutes, and then knock on another door down and spend 5, and convince all these people? Like, if they're not responding well to any of the basic principles, then, well, it was very nice to meet you, I appreciate your time, and you move on.
As a candidate, it's all about cost analysis, right? And time is cost. So how many votes can I get for an hour of my time? And you have to measure all that. And so I love, when I'm not a candidate, the long discussions over a table, those who completely are opposite opinion. And I'll have those discussions anytime. But as a candidate, you're always worried about that cost analysis of whether it's financially or time, and how many votes can I get for that amount of effort.
Yeah.
And you said it with door knocking. You don't want to spend a lot of time at each door. You want to hit as many as you can and get as positive feedback as possible.
Now, I will say this: if I'm out door knocking, or sometimes I did a lot of festivals, but not like the typical festivals. I would go to like music festivals and things like that, and we had campaign koozies that said "Mind Your Business" on it, and those went. Every single person, they would line up to get the free koozie just because it said "Mind Your Business," and then you have an opportunity to talk to as many people as possible. It's a great conversation starter. But I loved, and I'm completely fine with spending a sizable chunk of time if I feel like somebody is genuinely interested in the principles of liberty. I want to have as long of a conversation as I can possibly have with that person to try and get them actually excited, wanting to get more involved, and maybe not just the campaign. You know, if it's really hitting, pushing all the buttons and hitting home for them, I want to see them get involved in the party. You know, so.
I actually followed you a little bit, and one of your campaign videos either talked about the koozie or showed it, and it was one of my favorite videos of that mind your business koozie. So definitely stuck out to me when I was observing what you were doing over there in Alabama.
We went through so many of those. That was, I think, I'm gonna have to crunch the numbers, but I think that might be like a sixth of the campaign budget, and we did okay on fundraising, but we were pumping out those koozies because we had bars, like full bars that we would bring them every couple weeks and refill it, and they would just hand them out because people liked them. And I don't know how effective they were because there hasn't been a Libertarian on the ballot here in 20 years, so there's not really like, well, were we more effective this year than we were last year? You know, we just get to look at the numbers for this year. So maybe all the votes that I got came from koozies. Who knows?
Yeah, this might be oversimplifying what you're talking about with how much time you want to spend with people. But I think that a key difference between what you're talking about at the festival and like door knocking is that even if it's just for a free koozie, they're approaching you. They're making that first effort, and so they feel kind of like they're there consensually, and they're a little bit more open to what you have to say, and they know that they can walk away from the table at any time. Or if you're like at somebody's door just like arguing with them for a half an hour, like there's just so much more ickiness about that. I feel like when I'm doing petitioning, I tell my people 60 seconds. If you don't have the signature in 60 seconds and you don't feel like you're about to get it, walk away.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't think you should be arguing with anybody at their door. Just ever, under any circumstance. It doesn't matter if you disagree with what they're saying or not. But if you let somebody talk, if I can give somebody 2 minutes, and I can figure out in those 2 minutes, like there's got to be one issue that we have common ground on. And if I can identify that within those 2 minutes, I don't need to respond to any of the, gibberish that they spouted out before that I disagreed with. I just need to respond to that one thing that we agree on and expand on it. And, that's all they need. They need my name, and that's it. And they had a positive experience. They didn't hear somebody argue with them and tell them that they're wrong. They had somebody just show up and tell them that they were right. And they're like, oh, that's the person I want to vote for.
On the campaign trail, I noticed most people want to be heard. They don't even want to hear what you have to say. And often I'd win votes that way. Just be like, okay, well, tell me about your issues. And then I would agree with whatever I could agree with. And then obviously spin it with my libertarian, well, let's get the government out of this issue. And often just by listening, you win a lot of votes.
I was watching, I don't know if either of you have seen the show Inside Job on Netflix.
I have not watched it yet.
It's pretty good. It kind of makes fun of us like a lot, but what I actually love is the one episode that I'm gonna reference. The deep state runs a candidate, and he runs as a libertarian. So like completely controlled by the deep state. He's like a billionaire's son, but like he's running as a libertarian, and they portray us as kind of like the weird kooky right wing kind of Molyneux style libertarian is what they're portrayed at. But there's a line in it where he kind of like gives up and quits the campaign, and he says, "You guys just wanted to hear your opinions yelled back at you." And it's like, yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
That's accurate. It's definitely accurate.
And like it's portrayed really negatively in the show, and it is kind of a sucky reality that we live in, but it's a good thing for candidates to kind of listen to, because that's mostly what campaigning is. It's just, what do we agree on? Yes, we agree a lot.
Well, the thing is how libertarians talk to each other and how you talk to a real person, like an average voter. They're two very, very, very different things. Yeah, libertarians are not real people. I want to be very clear. If you are a libertarian, you are not a person to me. So, I've harped on it a lot, but the banking thing, I had a lot of libertarians kind of get mad at me and like question supporting me because I didn't say the words Federal Reserve, and they're like, "What are you even talking about? This sounds like more government." And I'm like, getting rid of the bank that controls our money? That sounds like more government? That makes no sense. You're supposed to be a libertarian. We're talking to non-libertarians. They don't know what the Federal Reserve is. I don't have time to explain to them the entire system. I think where Ron Paul, as great as he was for getting that subject matter out there and getting more people aware, but he spent a lot of his time, in situations where they're looking for sound bites, trying to go down this entire thing and explain an entire system using terms that nobody had heard before. And that it worked for some people, the people that have that portion of the brain that's very analytical, and they're like, this is exactly what I needed to hear. But then other people, they just vote on emotion, and if it's not a sound bite and something that's stuck in their head, it's lost on them. They'll never remember anything. They'll just be like, oh, who that old guy? Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. All right, we are going to take a real quick break and hear another word from one of our sponsors. They're our oldest sponsor, and if you don't know by now, Nug of Knowledge is the best place to get your mostly legal-ish cannabis needs in all 50 states. Go on over to nugofknowledge.com, use promo code FSM, and you'll get 5% off your first order. You'll support the show and the network, and I'll be very happy about it. But let's get back to the show. Guys, how and when did you start fundraising? That's my favorite question.
Not as early as I should have. History, I wasn't as lucky to find a treasurer right away. I think I went through 3 of them before I found one who actually was serious about it and did their job. So I think it was right before the nomination that I started collecting. So maybe a month before the nomination, which would have been February. But I really wanted to start the July before. I just couldn't find a competent treasurer to do it.
I started in January of 2021 taking in money. And the first goal was to hit the $5,000 the cap before you have to start reporting. And we did it as like a marketing thing where we were like, oh, the FEC says you're not a real candidate unless you've raised $5,000. Prove them wrong. Prove that libertarians are a real candidate. Donate to the campaign today and get us to $5,000. Most of that money very early on was spent on everything that we needed for like a kit to go to events, signage, everything needed to look, the goal was that it had to look more professional than the Republicans and the Democrats, because everybody feels like libertarians are like fringe candidates, or anybody who's not running as a Republican or Democrat, they're like, oh, well, they don't have any money, they don't have any support. We needed to have the appearance of like, oh, this is a legitimate, functional campaign. No matter how, like, we're running on shoestrings in the back, and it's a whole just like 4 people scrambling, but it didn't seem that way whenever we went to events. And so that's where that initial seed money from that Make Jonathan Real Again campaign came from, or what we did with it. But so it was tents, tables, a few pieces of literature. All of it needed to be very well, printed, look good, attention grabbing. And luckily I had some really, talented people working on all that initial stuff. There was Derek Britton helped, and Jeffrey Langenkamp. I'll give you 2 shout outs to people that worked very early on my campaign. And we wrote just a single sheet of paper that basically described libertarianism. We took things from the statement of principles and the platform, simplified the language, and made it very short sentences and things like that could be easy to read. We had that on the table, and that was to libertarians a very popular piece of information, because they're like, oh, can I have some of these, because now I finally have something that explains what a libertarian is in simple terms. But yeah, we did all that kind of stuff right at the beginning, so that way as soon as we started taking events in the spring, we were able to set up, look very professional, and that definitely helped with later fundraising, because everybody had seen how professional the campaign had been run from the get-go. And so by the time convention rolled around and national convention rolled around, people had already seen that we had been doing work. So I would say start taking in money as early as possible, very quickly.
Like if you're thinking about running for Senate in 2024, start now.
Start now. If you are even right, exactly. The exploratory committee. Start an exploratory committee if you are considering running.
Absolutely. And a fun fact about that, there is a limit on federal campaigns how much an individual can donate, but they can donate that full amount before your nomination and that full amount after your nomination. So there's a lot of things to look at, and the earlier you start, the more you can raise.
But I also think that might be on a state-by-state basis. I know in Alabama, we could not do the before and after with our nomination process, because in Alabama, the state requires that the Libertarian Party be listed as a PAC and not a political party.
Okay,
and
so it might be different in Alabama.
Yeah. So I think I would check your local state laws to figure out whether or not they can exploit you for fees.
Yeah, I think that has to do with whether or not you're a recognized party, because to the best of my knowledge, that is something that the major parties can do in at least every state that I've worked in, is that double dipping. So I know that we were able to do that in New York for the year and a half that we did have ballot access, and I know that you guys are pretty solid in Indiana, so that might be why.
We're considered a minor party, so we have we function basically like one of the majors other than our primaries.
So that may be the case for the next 2 years here, because we are considered a minor party now.
Nice.
Because we had ballot access.
I would definitely check into that.
Yeah.
So what were the main policies that you guys focused on? I know we've kind of already talked about a number of them, but if somebody stopped you in the street and like, oh, what's your main 3 issues?
Yeah, so we did a lot of work on these 3 issues. We looked at what was pulling. Inflation was number 1, so I called it fiscal sanity, because I believe Washington's insane with the money right now. The second one was medical freedom, and that really was from COVID and realizing how much they're even trying to infringe on the rights with whether it be vaccinations or just making medical choices for the individual. And then the third one was my vet care program, and that one I actually got to talk about the most, and it was actually the most exciting because it had an actual plan that I wrote out for veterans to help them with their health care and to make it easier. And it was a libertarian solution, so it's taking funds from the VA, but what it does is it actually goes in the individual accounts for HSA. And I got a lot of positive feedback on that about how both it minimizes the government's involvement, but also makes sure that we are still taking care of our veterans.
So That's a tricky question because as I brought up before, I did tailor my my message depending on the audience. But I would say pretty much everywhere we were going to talk about qualified immunity. It didn't matter. That was a very popular issue with anyone, as long as you frame it correctly. And but there were some other weird issues that they got a positive response, and so I just kind of kept using them. So I did a lot of I went to as many Juneteenth events as possible, and something that you hear a lot in these events is the idea of they talk about reparations a good bit. And reparations, under the way that it's typically pitched, would not be in line with the libertarian philosophy, because it would require either some sort of organization to be created and then taxpayer money get used. But I came up with a libertarian take to be able to talk about it in those situations where that issue is something that people are talking about. So one of the things that I ended up using a lot was talking about reinstating the land lottery, because we have 2.5 acres for every citizen in federal government land, and as libertarians, we don't think that the federal government should own land. But a lot of times libertarians talk about, well, let's sell it off. Well, all that's going to do is give the federal government more money. Why would we want to give the federal government more money? That doesn't seem in line with our views at all. So we already have a system in place that we've used before, except the previous times that we had the land lottery, it was racist and sexist. We can just try it without that, and it'll probably work. And there's, people, I used it as a way to talk about reparations, and I got a lot of positive feedback on that. But then I realized that there's a lot of people, the young left, the Bernie bros and things like that talk about how they, rent's going up and they can't afford to buy anything and they can't afford to own a house and all that stuff. It's like, okay, all right, well, how about this? Let's just get rid of the federal land. You can become a landowner. What you do with it, you might sell it, you might trade it off to someone, you might, whatever you want to do, it's yours. But the federal government's not paying, you're not paying taxes on it. The federal government doesn't own it anymore. And I know that's a really weird libertarian issue, but it got a lot of positive response from people, and it had them thinking about, like, why does the federal government own so much land? They don't think about the fact that most of it's desert. You don't have to talk about that. But it gets them, thinking about how large the federal government is. So, with running as a libertarian, you do have to kind of keep your expectations realistic, but at the same time, I know that we're supposed to be offering solutions, and we should be offering solutions. But at the same time, Donald Trump never intended to build that wall. He knew it wasn't going to happen, but it was popular, and it got a lot of people fired up. And a lot of people talk about things. The right talks about we got to do something about these abortions, but are they really going to do anything? No, they're not, because then they have to stop talking about it. Right. And that's the same thing with a lot of people in political positions. They're never going to actually accomplish anything, but they know how to get people on their side. And I think we might need to be doing a little more of that. Let's get people on our side, because we're not going to accomplish anything if we can't take over the government and leave people alone.
Right. I like the land lottery idea.
I pitched that to Spike. Spike had a really horrible idea for reparations that he was going around and saying, and I was like, Spike, I got to talk to you, buddy. Yours. He's like, I know that increases the size of government, but I couldn't come up with anything better. And I'm like, gotcha. The land lottery, dude. The land lottery. So Spike, that's for you. I've put you on blast.
That
watching.
It's very similar to one that one of my friends ran on when he was running for New York City Council the year after me. He was talking about basically just giving everyone in city housing the deed to the apartment. Just like one easy, cut and dry action that just all of these people instantly become owners of $500,000 apartments because they're all still in New York City. And, you know, they're free to do whatever they want with it. It doesn't actually cost the city anything. You know, they lose a lot of asset, but not actually anything tangible that they were going to do anything reasonable with, and get rid of all of the maintenance cost, everything else. And, you know, just and then, you know, those people can go out and get really good jobs and not have to worry about losing their apartment.
And they'll learn very quickly about property taxes. And they'll definitely want to decrease property taxes very quickly once they own the apartment.
Oh yeah.
Which, by the way, that's a lesson everybody in the land lottery will be learning too. Whenever they get that land and that county property tax comes in.
Oh yeah. All right, so I asked you to narrow down your issues to ask you guys a follow-up question. How do you guys plan on continuing to advocate for these issues now that you're off the campaign trail?
I plan on writing a 5-platform point platform that things that I felt like people responded very well to, that are outward-facing messages from a libertarian perspective that doesn't sound like a libertarian. I plan on writing a short page on those issues and putting it out to anybody who's considering running for office, in hopes that more people will adopt those issues in running as a libertarian.
The one issue that I really wanted to promote, to keep promoting beyond the Senate run, is my vet care program. Because we did a lot of work to see how this would work and how it would reduce the VA's infringement on the rights and medical rights of those who fought for us. So I would love to see a full campaign with just that specific issue. And I'm not talking about a political campaign. I'm talking about, hey, veterans, we can do better for you. Let's promote vet care, and actually create a thing from it. So that other candidates, especially libertarian candidates, can run on that, and we can actually make change. Because once the other parties see it, they have to respond in some form. So I really wanted to take that into almost a pack, and even buy a couple billboards, make people question, well, why aren't we getting the care we need? Where are these solutions coming from? And then they can see that libertarians really do have real life solutions.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's missing a lot from LP campaigns is, you know, name recognition prior to running. And like, obviously we don't have any like gigantic celebrities in the party, but we don't need that for
I am a gigantic celebrity.
But you know, we don't need that for a city council or a state house race or something like that. But what we do need is just name recognition in the community, or, you know, within the political sphere of some sort. So, you know, if you're running for city council as someone who has gotten up in front of city council to give testimony on a dozen issues in the last year, you're somebody that people consider as belonging on that bench in that room doing that thing. You know, same, you know, whether or not it's promoting an issue, driving a pack, doing volunteer work, whatever it is, if you can get yourself out in the community to where people are like, oh yeah, I kind of like that guy. Just a basic positive opinion of you goes a long way at the beginning of a campaign.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. See, I go the other direction, rather than trying to focus on name recognition from the political sphere. I do think that there's an entire, I don't know, like 60% of the population, the people that don't vote, their name recognition is all from entertainment-based things. They know people from social media. They know people from TV. They know musicians, but they couldn't tell you who's running for office for any position. Probably not even president sometimes.
They know the guest referee at their local wrestling.
Exactly. They know the guest referee at their local wrestling, which sometimes is me. And so those are the people that I am going to be focused on trying to reach out to in the next year specifically. Where I move on after that year is to be announced. But over the next year, that's using entertainment-based outreach strategies is my focus.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Which, we already did that with the campaign. I mean, we had Afro Man. You can't get more entertainment-based outreach than Afro Man.
No, that I'm very sad I didn't make it out to that.
You should have made it. It was so much fun.
I was trying.
Spike Cohen was the only sober person in the entire convention center.
As it should be. It's one of the reasons I respect him so much. He's the only person I know that can be so sober in a room of people so not sober and still fit in.
And somehow he was carrying around a baked potato for like an hour and a half, and he was the only sober person. He's just walking around with a baked potato. It was not his. It got slipped into his hand by someone. He never put it down. And he just carried it for an hour and a half. He didn't know whose potato it was. And he wasn't asking. He wasn't walking around being like, whose potato is this? He just was carrying a potato at an Afro Man concert. Somehow that happened, and he was the sober person.
That sounds about right. Were there any star down ballot candidates that you guys worked with that you see, really rising up and maybe getting elected to local office in the next couple of years?
David Boatwright in my area. I've got his sign right here behind me. He ran for State Senate 28, and he did better than most of the candidates around the state. He did a hell of a job. I was helping him with his strategy a lot, and unfortunately, until the last month, I think we had the wrong strategy. And then it finally clicked, like, oh, we've been focused on the wrong people. We actually have a shot to win this if we just shift. Had we figured that out earlier, I think we would have done better. But it's a learning experience.
Hell yeah.
I got a lot of down ballot candidates that I was super excited about, including some congressional candidates. Will Henry, the one I actually ran against for the Senate, he ended up running for congressional. Amazing candidate. Tanya Millis, amazing candidate. But those were all on the federal level. One of the most awesome ones to watch was Kristen Alexander on the local level. And she's just an incredible candidate. She ended up losing her race by just a small margin, but the fact is she built so much name recognition in her community. I believe she should run again, and I think that she is going to have a significant impact on the Libertarian Party in the future.
Hell yeah. You'll love to see
I also
it.
want to plug Ruth Page Nelson, who ran for lieutenant governor down here in Alabama. She's amazing, and I don't know if she'll run for office again because she kind of had to be coaxed into this one, but she did a great job, and I really would love to see her run for office again. This was her third time running for office, and she didn't want to run for office again, or it might have been her fourth time. But yeah, I think she's done, but we'll see. That could just be post-election, like I think I'm done, and then all of a sudden, 2 years from now, it's like, you know what? I still got one more in me.
Yeah.
One thing that was cool that happened in Indiana, talking about down ballot candidates, in one county, we actually had more Libertarians run than Democrats. So that was a lot of fun to see.
We had more Libertarians than Democrats statewide here in Alabama.
That's awesome.
Whenever election night coverage was happening, everything was red and gold on almost every race.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Ah.
I definitely took some pictures. It kind of got emotional a little bit, like, oh, we did it, guys.
I was watching some of the LP National election coverage with you guys down in Alabama.
Oh boy.
With my parents.
We had so many tech problems. Sorry about the audio.
It wasn't terrible when I was watching. I was just looking for something that would cover, the races that I actually cared about, like yours. And it was just kind of flipping through YouTube. And I didn't find any good coverage this year, which makes me like determined next year I have to do election night coverage for Free Speech Media. I'll get a couple of people together and do a whole thing, because like I just didn't find anything that I actually wanted to watch election night this year.
Yeah, that would be great. You definitely should do that. I didn't realize that there was a vacuum for more election night coverage, but if there's a market for it and a desire and a need for more election night coverage, then yes, give them people what they want. They want more election night coverage.
Yeah, I might be the only person that wanted more election night coverage. I'm sure that's a more likely possibility. So looking back, are there any like if only moments, anything that you would do differently if you could go back or if you run again?
Fundraising. I mean, I've said it before, but the more you raise, the more you can put out libertarian messages, the more you can tell people what libertarianism is, the more you can tell who you are as a candidate. Start earlier with that. And for me, it was difficult. I had to compete with a couple other good candidates in Indiana, as far as the Secretary of State, for example, for good cause. He had our ballot access at stake. So the Secretary of State is the only one who gets ballot access. So he ended up fundraising more than I did as a Senate candidate, and that because of that ballot access. But the reality is we need to start earlier with fundraising and get the name out more.
I am not positive that I would really do anything differently, like to an extreme, to the point to where it's like a note. I think, there's times you always like do something wrong, but then you have to adjust in the moment. But I'm pretty happy with everything that we accomplished. I would love to have raised more funds, but I've also seen what other people raised, and we kind of outpaced them. So I guess I can't really complain. I just am trying to hold myself to the duopoly standards of I need all this money to go out there and put my face on everything, because that's what the Republican did. There wasn't a billboard in the district that didn't have Barry Moore on it, and he won in a landslide. So I don't know if it's just the Republican thing but yeah, I mean, okay, all right, one note. I do have one thing that I would do differently. There were a lot of times in short conversations, I would have a conversation about policy, tell them that I'm running for office, and tell them what district, and I would never mention what party I was in. I would mention what was important to me is like, here's the election date, here's what I'm running for, here's my name. And I didn't tell them like, oh, you have to make sure that you were going down the ballot and voting Libertarian. I was not thinking about the straight ticket voting that we have in Alabama. So there were a lot of people that they voted in people that, and then realized after the fact that they didn't even know that person, and then freaked out like, how did this person even get elected? It's like, well, you voted straight ticket. So that would be what I would have done differently, is I would have used the don't vote straight ticket for at least the first year. I didn't do that until close to the end.
You guys have straight ticket voting in Indiana too, right?
We do, and I almost want to see the opposite message. Vote straight ticket, but vote Libertarian straight ticket. Because ultimately we actually want to end straight ticket voting. But if we got enough people to straight ticket vote Libertarian, we could make a significant impact, and they would eventually get rid of it. I think there's only 8 states with straight ticket. It really makes no sense. I don't know why Indiana is so behind on that issue.
Yeah, see, I didn't feel comfortable doing that, and this is going to be unpopular as a libertarian, but there were a few people that are on the local level that they're Democrats, and in Alabama, as a Democrat, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a lot like the national party. You're just the opposition party. For the longest time, that was the only way you could run for office, is as a Democrat if you wanted to run against the Republican. And there were a few people that, if you followed their career and their voting record, they absolutely are in line with the Libertarians, and they're just in the wrong party. And I did not want to pull any votes away from those those candidates by saying like vote straight ticket, because it would do the same thing that it does to us whenever people vote straight ticket. Is somebody who's a good candidate wouldn't get the vote. So yeah, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. We focused on the people over party message, and we had a few people, that were on some of our flyers that we were handing out, like educational about certain races, and there was not a libertarian in that specific race, and we had other people on here, and here's the reason why you should vote for those people. They're for lowering your taxes. They're good on the Second Amendment. We had a wiretapping bill that they voted down. We had a whole list of issues that are libertarian issues, and it allowed us to show that it is not about party. I mean, as much as we want people to vote libertarian, it's really there can be a horrible libertarian. And I wouldn't want to tell somebody to vote straight ticket and vote for a horrible libertarian, just like I wouldn't want to tell them to vote straight ticket just to get me one more vote.
Yeah. And as a candidate, I never did tell people. I was just saying from a party standpoint, if we want to end straight ticket, I think that's the strategy to end it, because.
I agree.
Yeah.
But I never vote straight ticket, and the reality is I believe you should research every single person on your ballot, and so that's really how you need to vote. But getting that message out to others is very difficult. To me, it's odd in Indiana because everybody blames the straight ticket voting, and we have landslide Republican victories recently. But if you actually go back in elections, Obama did split the ticket somehow, and he won here in a highly Republican area. And there's been a few others who were able to split it. So I really want to research how those specific individuals did it, because it's not impossible. Ultimately, it's a huge uphill battle.
Yeah. One of the things that I would suggest for anyone running for office, if you can get the voter data for your district, go through the spreadsheets and find the areas. You can find where if you have straight ticket, this is specific advice for people that have straight ticket in their state. You can find the places where you can see where the votes came from the straight ticket and where people actually went down the ballot and voted. And a lot of times, if you go through the numbers, you can find that certain precincts are more predispositioned to actually take time and go down the ballot. And I would suggest spending a lot of your time in those precincts canvassing, trying to hit those people, because that 70% of them are actually going to take the time to go down the ballot. And then there's going to be certain areas where not even 10% of the people go down the ballot. You should probably still campaign there, but do you want to spend all of your time there? Probably not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I just want to echo that thing you just said about if you're thinking about running for office, definitely get the voter data. And then go back and watch episode 104 of this show with James's state chair, Evan McMahon, and then figure out what to actually do with all of that voter data, because we had a great discussion on how to build a CRM, what to do with data, how to go through it. Because that's a huge thing that the other two parties just have. Like it's just a guarantee for them that they have really intricate CRMs with all of these people's voting histories and leanings and a bunch of different polling questions, and they've talked to them a bunch of different ways, and they've scrubbed their social medias and a whole bunch of other things. We need to be on that. And I mean, yeah, in Indiana they're doing some great things with that, about actually keeping up with that, but the rest of the states need to get on board.
100%, and we do utilize it, and it works. So if all 50 states can get on board with something very similar to research, because research is how we win votes. I mean, we look at strategies, just like you said, Jonathan. Look at people who actually split the ticket, and there are counties that are significantly higher in that. I look at like some of for Indiana, the names are kind of irrelevant for those outside, but like Hamilton County is one of those, or Boone County, they'll split the tickets more. So looking at that information.
Yeah, I think everybody should work just one like random Democratic campaign, even if it's just like local, as long as they're using NGP van. just volunteer for like a week. You don't even have to do a very good job. Just experience what they have in their technology, and then it will get you fired up for the Libertarian Party to catch up. Because like I know a lot of people don't really have a concept of how good the Democrats have it, but it's ridiculous how much information you just instantly have if you're a state level candidate or higher.
Well, I think that also might depend on the state, because in Alabama they're struggling.
Fair.
I had a Democrat tell me that he's impressed by how organized and how we have more resources as libertarians and compared to the Democrats. They're like, he's like, man, your party is crushing it. We've got nothing. And I'm like, that's terrifying. If we're crushing it, how bad is it over there?
Man, so what's the ETA on just like swallowing the entire Democratic Party into the LP?
I've got a few people that I think that are libertarians. They just were, had to run somewhere, and they don't feel represented by the Democratic Party at all. I've got a few of them that I'm working on trying to get over to the LP, and then I think once they come, it's going to be like a crippling blow, because they're people that are very active, and then we'll swallow up the other people whenever they need a lifeboat.
I dig it.
I shouldn't be telling everyone on the internet that we're going to take down the Democratic Party and how we're going to do it, but let me explain the strategy in full detail.
I mean, hey, try and stop us, right? Like, this is ultimately up to, the individuals that you're talking about and then the voters. Like, it's not going to be that difficult in some states for us to take that number 2 slot. And then I think we really get to have some fun once we break that number 2 spot.
So there's only a handful of ballot access retention races in Alabama in 24. And the Democrats are only a few points ahead of the number that where they would lose ballot access. If they just were a few points lower than what they are now, we could actually make the Democrats lose ballot access. And so I think that absolutely should be one of the goals.
Hell yeah.
Because they'll change the ballot access laws real quick if they're about to not have ballot access anymore. And I think it's like 8%. If we could pull away like 8% and just just 2 statewide races in 24 here in Alabama, if we could take 8% of the Democratic votes, they would lose ballot access, and that would be the death blow.
That would be beautiful.
So keep an eye on Alabama. We'll see what happens.
I definitely was this year, and I'm very much looking forward to what you guys are doing in the next couple of years. I'm honestly glad that it was you guys on the show, because in my opinion, like Alabama and Indiana are crushing it in ways that most states are not. So I'm really excited about what you guys were able to do with your campaigns and what your state parties are working on going forward. Before we wrap up, I want to give you guys both a chance to, shout out your state party and how to get involved, how to, maybe run for office if people watching want to do that.
So yeah, again, Indiana's an amazing state for liberty, and we saw the Donald Rainwater break the 10% margin. We're doing huge things in Indiana. So if you really want to get involved, I recommend going to your local county chapter. And I think we're at, I want to say over 50 counties of the 92. We do have affiliated, but we're working on affiliating on 92. So go to your local county, get involved there. Make sure you get involved in the state level too. Evan McMahon's our state chair, does an amazing job, as already been mentioned. And then the third thing we have, which is awesome, is the tribe membership. So you can actually be a member of national, state, and your county gets a kickback. So those are all great ways. You can find out more information, www.lpin.org. And definitely follow the Liberty message, follow the Libertarian Party. We're doing some amazing things. And I'm really excited about 2023 for a lot of reasons, because it's all our local elections. We're going to really focus a lot of energy on that. And I believe that's where we'll pick up a lot of wins. So definitely get involved in 2023, because we need volunteers, whether you're a candidate yourself or whether you want to be on a team, and see what it's all about, so that maybe you can even volunteer for a federal campaign the following year.
Hell yeah.
So, just ditto to everything that James just said, but you can do it at lpalabama.org in Alabama. But one of the things that I think is it's important to join if you haven't already joined, but I'm imagining probably everybody watching this, they've already got that membership card. But what is really important if you were about to run for office, I firmly believe that right now, before you've announced and before the stipulations get placed on you, you should be involved in your community doing volunteerism, because that is core to being a libertarian. We have to show people that the world can be a good place, and we don't need the government to be our daddy. And the best way to do that is to be out in your community. Right now it's the holidays. Put together a toy drive. There's always some sort of need that's out there.